Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So for those of you who don't know, I make content relating to my active fentanyl addiction. I'm actually just starting the path to coming off of that, the withdrawal process, and I will be filming all of that as well. And also I film content relating to my prison experience. So I worked in a men's lifers prison, and I also was in a relationship with somebody who was incarcerated as well. So I have two different perspectives on that. This video is going to be to do with the prison experience that I had and discussing some of the really shocking things that I saw, things that really surprised me, some things that are really sad as well. There were a lot, so this video is by far not all that there is, and I will be filming more, but this is just some of the things that I saw often on a daily basis that shocked me for the whole time that I was there. So the first thing would be the amount of self-harming that I saw with the prisoners, and often it was not small levels of self-harming. Any self-harming is obviously needs to be addressed and needs to be helped, but there were often really awful, really deep wounds, things that I've never ever seen before. Even working in the healthcare industry, I was shocked at things that I saw, and like I say, on a daily basis. There was also people that were renowned for swallowing things, so whether it be cutlery, whether it be drawing pins, cling film, whatever they could get hold of, they would swallow. And also inserting things, these are men inserting things into themselves, such as TV aerials, as pens, as anything that they could get hold of. It was a form of self-harming. Obviously a lot of these people do have mental health issues, but I found that so shocking. I also found how normal it seemed to everybody, also really shocking. It was just, oh, so and so's put a TV aerial down his penis again, and it was like, oh, okay, that again. It was bizarre, just crazy, and you want to help people, but A&1, I was not mental health trained, and also it's impossible to help everyone, especially on my own, which I felt like I was a lot of the time. It's really difficult. Kind of off the back of that was the amount of attempts at suicide that I saw. People did pass away in the time that I worked there through attempting to take their own life. Luckily enough for me, I was not on shift at that time, so it wasn't something that I physically witnessed, which I'm so glad about, because I really would have struggled with that. Obviously, I wish that poor guy could have got some help and he would have just spoken out to somebody. He was not somebody that we knew. It was a massive prison. Had 800 plus men who were mostly all in for murder, and you've got the ones who you knew, because a lot of them would be there for a long period of time in this particular prison. So there was ones that we knew. There was people that, you know, we'd see every day or every few days, or always come up with medication. And then there's probably half of the population, maybe more, who we never saw. I wouldn't know who they were, and this was one of those people. He'd never asked for help, and it was really sad to hear when I came in the morning that he'd passed away. Just the number of attempts that I went with the emergency team to, or that I heard about, just awful, just honestly. And in all sorts of ways. There was a lot of overdoses. There was quite a lot of attempts to take their own life being elevated off the ground. There was every way imaginable, really, but there was a couple of instances that I really struggled with. So one was when we were just about to leave. We were just packing up, and we were literally just about to leave, and we heard over the radio. Now there's code red means a lot of blood. It's a call for the emergency team. Code red's a lot of blood. Code blue is anything else, usually, like could be a heart attack, could be an overdose, could be drugs, could be anything, but anything that's not blood, so that we know which bag to take with us, if we need to take the red bag which has got lots of like bandages and things, or the other bag. So we got called code blue to this cell, and I heard the lady over the radio say hanging, and I can literally hear that in my head now, and it was horrible, like just hearing that and knowing what we were going to. I didn't know what to expect. I'd not been there that long, and I was lucky to be with a lot of nurses who had been to these things many times. And when we got there was already a nurse there who was resuscitating him, and he came around while we were there. Obviously he went to hospital and got treated, and was also offered a lot of mental health help. But I struggled with that one a lot. Like, hearing the word just makes it so real. This is what's happening right here, right now. Somebody is trying to take their own life and we need to stop it. So that I found difficult. And the other one, I was with a nurse and we were walking around towards segregation, and we heard again over the radio, code blue segregation, you know, whatever cell, and we were nearby, so we thought, right, well, let's go. And when we got there, the doctor was doing our rounds. She wasn't going to check on this. Well, the officer had said, oh, don't worry about him, he's only just come onto the wing. And she said, no, I'll do him. She was a great doctor, brilliant doctor. And she said, no, come on, I need to do my job properly. And thank God she did, because as soon as she opened the door, she saw him and she had to put him down and hold him and help him. The doctors don't do emergency, it's the nurse and any support. Like myself, I was a healthcare assistant and we support the nurse. But yeah, thank God she did that. And when we got there, he was blue, and that was horrifying. He was completely out of it, wouldn't open his eyes, and like I say, he was blue. His lips were blue, and he had bruising around his neck, and it was just horrible. And luckily, by the time we helped him for a little while, he came back round, and obviously again he went to hospital to get some support. But seeing somebody go blue is really difficult, and something that I can see that image so clearly right now, and it's a horrible image. Off the back of that, there were so many people who this was everyday normal for them. We'd come out of, just helping somebody come back to life, and the nurses would just be talking about, and the officers would just be like, oh, what you having for your dinner, what you're doing tonight, what you're doing on your day off. And I couldn't get my head around it, because for me it was so abnormal and something that I was just so shocked by. But for them, they dealt with it for so long and so many years, it just seemed so normal to them. And I don't think even if I'd have been there 10 years, I could have ever got used to that. Maybe I wasn't meant to work there, or maybe I was because I cared so much, but that was difficult to see people like that, definitely. An incident that I will honestly never forget was where a prisoner who was on an amphetamine medication for his ADHD. This prisoner had been to see the psychiatrist, and he had increased his amphetamine medication from 70 to 100. This prisoner was somebody who could get a little bit rowdy, but I never witnessed, and I don't know anybody who did witness him ever being aggressive, ever being violent. Obviously he was in there for a violent crime, but whilst he was in there, I don't know anybody who witnessed this. He kind of kept himself to himself. He'd have a laugh. He was a little bit loud at times, but never offensive, never aggressive. This prisoner we had moved to segregation because he was being really aggressive, getting in the officers' faces, getting into fights, and it kind of struck a chord with me. I thought, that doesn't seem like him. I hadn't been there that long at this point. I'd been there long enough, I'd met him quite a lot, but thought that doesn't seem to fit with him, like is there something going on? And they said for about the last, week or so, he'd been acting really weird. And I remember him saying, coming up for his medication, saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel really on edge. I feel really fired up all the time. Come to find out that when somebody reassessed his medication, the psychiatrist had not amended his previous prescription, his script. So instead of being on 70, taking off the 70 script and replacing it with 100, he'd kept both scripts. So he was on 170. Now, that is an illegal dose. And he honestly should have been dead. He was on it for 10 days and the fact that he was alive was shocking. And he seemed, fairly well. Was awful. Shocking that he was still like that. So we told him, one of the nurses told him what had happened, and he said, is this why I've been the way that I've been? Because it's an amphetamine. And they said, yeah, that will be why. And he started to cry. And he said, I thought I was going mad. I thought there was something wrong with me. And it was just that you were overdosing me. And I felt like my heart broke at that time because I felt so bad for him. Anyway, we had to obviously do checks on him, make sure that his heart rate was okay. That was the main thing, his heart rate. And all his other vital signs were okay, which they seemed fine. Now we had to keep on top of them and keep checking them every day for a couple of weeks. And the next day I went with another nurse to segregation and did his checks. And he just looked so sad. And I thought, let's have a little chat with him. I was with the nurse and we did his signs, and he said, is it the medication that made me out like this? And the nurse said, it's most likely it is. And he said, so why am I still in segregation? And she said to the officer, to be fair, we've accepted responsibility for the fact that his medication would cause him to be like this. So he therefore shouldn't be here. And the officers were like, well, he's here now, so we're not going to move him. He was being aggressive. And she said, yeah, but it was because of the medication. The medication's been changed now. No, he did what he did. And we tried to argue his case as much as we could, but they wouldn't have it and they wouldn't move him back. And he was crying to us and saying, please, can you move us back to general population? And we can't physically do that as members of healthcare. It has to be the officers, and there was nothing we could do. And I felt so awful for him because it wasn't his fault. It was healthcare's fault, psychiatrist's fault, and it wasn't fair on him that he was put in that situation. And honestly, one of the nurses encouraged him to make a formal complaint and said, you need to complain about this. It's not good enough and it's not fair. Luckily, he ended up being okay and he ended up eventually going back to general population. But God, my heart really went out to him. I felt awful for him. It was just a horrible situation for him to be in, and it wasn't fair at all. There was also another prisoner who found out he was terminally ill through a letter from the hospital. The hospital didn't inform us so that we could tell him in person. One of the doctors could have told him. They sent a letter. That letter went to him and told him he was going to die. He had, I think they said he had about 8 months to live. How is that okay? Yes, prisoners have done wrong, but they deserve the exact same level of care they would get outside that they would get inside prison. Nobody would be told in a letter they were terminally ill. They would get told face to face, at the very least over the phone, but face to face generally. He was told in a letter and left to his own devices. I went onto the wing and was informed of this, and I couldn't believe it. And I sat with him, and he was starting to take his own life, which you can completely understand in that situation why somebody would be that way. I went to mental health and I kept saying, please can somebody see this guy's threatening to take his own life. He's just had some awful news. Can someone go and see him? I was off for a few days. I come back in. I went onto the wing and still no one had been to see him. And I asked again and again and again, and it took weeks. I'm not being funny. Thank God he didn't, but he could have taken his own life by then. And no one did anything about it because nobody really cared. That really struck a chord with me, because my granddad was very poorly at the time. He was terminally ill. And I just thought, like, the way that, yes, you can argue prisoners have done wrong, but they should still be entitled to basic level of care. And he wasn't given that. He really, really wasn't. And it just, honestly, I was so shocked and so saddened by that. I went to go and see him every day and just have a chat with him. I let him know I'm not mental health trained. I can't offer counselling, I can't offer mental health support, but I can sit here and you can vent to me, and if there's anything I can do, I will do it. But that's all I can offer at this point. I tried with the officers asking for, you know, an extra pillow to make him more comfortable, or a different chair or different mattress, and honestly I might as well have talked to the wall most of the time. There was a couple of officers that were really good and knew about his situation and would try and help him, but it wasn't very often, to be honest with you. And yeah, I feel for him. I really did. I did feel for him in that situation. And I left around the time that he was poorly, so unfortunately I don't know if he's still alive now, but I know he was very poorly, and I just wish he could have got a little bit more support with that. A similar kind of situation was another prisoner who unfortunately was terminally ill as well. This prisoner was classed as a high profile prisoner. He was previously in a relationship with and had children with a famous actress, so he was kind of considered a little bit famous. He was very old school gangster. He had lots of stories, lots of crazy stories. He owned a load of the nightclubs in London and a load of strip clubs in London, and the things that he got up to, my God. He told me some stories, and I never felt threatened by him. I think you knew the ones that I could say that were a typical old school gangster that wouldn't lay a finger on a woman, and he was one of those. You didn't feel threatened by him at all. He was, yes, he'd done wrong, but his heart was in the right place, and he was there for protecting a good friend of his who was being bullied. Not saying what he did was right, I'm not justifying it, but yeah, the difference is with him to a lot of them is I felt safe. I could go into his cell and not feel under any threat at all. But he was wild. There were situations when he was being moved from prison to prison or from court to a prison, and he said he was in the van. There was police cars surrounding the van, 2 helicopters, and the wheels of the van could not stop at any point because of him, which is mad. And he used to say to me, it's like being a fucking old people's home in here, compared to some of the places he'd been. Like, he was a funny character, but unfortunately he got very poorly, and he knew it was terminal, and everyone was saddened by it because he was a bit of a local celebrity. Everyone knew him. Everyone would say, "You alright, mate?" And he'd come, and he was chatty, and he got on with everyone, and you know, he was as good as he can be. He was a good guy, but he lost a hell of a lot of weight because he had terminal cancer. He lost a hell of a lot of weight, and you could see in his face that he was getting more and more poorly. we had the social services come in, so they used to come and just check upon the guys who we had like care packages for. So some were older, some were disabled, and we just go down and make sure they were having showers, taking the medication, had they got clean clothes, did they need clean bedding, all that sort of thing. And I took the guy down to see this guy, and I explained the situation, and he had a bit of a chat with him. And he said to me, "So can you not go to a hospice?" And I kind of half smiled and said that I have been trying to fight for him to go to a hospice. I've been asking for this for a long period of time, and all I get is he's a high profile case, he can't. And the guy said, "I've heard of really high profile cases where they've managed to go to hospice just to spend the last, few months or weeks." And I said, honestly, I don't believe, I could put my hand on my heart and say I do not think he would hurt a single soul if he was out in a hospice. I think he'd just want to live out his final days being supported, being cared for how he should be. And he said, "Why can't it be done?" And I said, honestly, by all means try, and I will support you, but I've been asking for this. I've been saying this is what he needs, and no one cares. Like, no one listens to me. No one is supporting me. No one's saying, "Do you know what, that's a good idea, let's make it happen." And I'm just one person, and I'm kind of the lowest of the low on the ranks. I don't really get a say, and so it's very, very difficult for me to make any sort of change happen. I need the support of a lot of other people, which I never really got. Unfortunately, I left, and like I say, because he was very well known, a little bit famous, I did hear through the grapevine that he did pass away, and I was devastated to hear about that. I really, really was. I hoped they might be able to do something, but unfortunately not. So he did get to go to hospice, but for about a week before he passed away, maybe a couple of weeks, no longer than that. And I really, really wish he could have spent even a few months in a hospice. It just would have made the end of his life that little bit easier. But I really did feel for him, and my God, I've got some stories to tell. He was a brilliant character, and I'm sure he's very, very missed. As I said, this is just some of the crazy and shocking and horrible, sad things that I witnessed and that I heard about and that I saw in prison in the time that I worked there, and things that I just wish could have been different. I wish I could have been listened to more, and I could have made more of a change, because I'm only one person, and that was a difficult thing, trying to fight a battle against people that really don't give a shit, or that want people to be in some form of pain because they're very sick individuals and they like having that power. It's very, very difficult to fight somebody who has that mindset and to get them to do something about the situation. As I say, there was some officers that were great, there was some healthcare staff that was great, but they were few and far between in comparison to the ones that really weren't great and weren't there for the right reasons. So it was really, really difficult to make any sort of positive change happen. As I say, I've got loads and loads more stories like this, and all sorts of other things that I witnessed, so I will make sure that I film a video on those as well. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like this kind of content, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!